Today we're going to talk about the 7 things you should never say to your ex. And perhaps what's most interesting about the things that I'm about to lay out to you is that they really lie on a spectrum, specifically extreme ends of the spectrum. So imagine this for a moment. Close your eyes and imagine a spectrum, a straight linear line. On one end of the spectrum, you have things like saying I love you or I miss you. And then on the other end of the spectrum, things like saying I hate you or I never want to get back together with you. Oftentimes, the things that you're going to hear today that I talk about, these 7 things, are going to lie on the extreme ends of this spectrum. And truthfully, that's sort of an idea that not a lot of people look at in that specific way. But you'll find that that's the consistent theme throughout these 7 things. So let's get right to it. Thing number 1, let's get back together. All right, so let me ask you a question. Why is this such a bad thing to say? Well, there's a bunch of reasons. The first most obvious thing that comes to mind is that oftentimes it should be your ex's idea to get back together and not your idea to get back together. But also there's the concept of show, don't tell. So one of the things that I always have to reiterate for my clients is a lot of times one of the worst things that you can do with an ex is tell them what you want. Instead, seek ways to show them what you want. And then also there's the concept that basically sitting there and saying to your ex, hey, I want to get back together, especially when it's too early to have that type of a conversation, it's not very ungettable. So I talk a lot about the concept of ungettable. In fact, I've written an entire book about what ungettable is. Simply put, ungettable is becoming the type of woman that every man wants but no man thinks they can get. And this kind of creates this allure and this chase factor. Well, there's nothing more gettable than someone saying, I want to get back together with you. Thing number 2, anything that can be interpreted as begging. So we've been on record saying that a lot of the clients that come through our program tend to have anxious attachment styles. And people with anxious attachment styles tend to put their entire identity into relationships. Now, that seems like a great thing when you're in a relationship, but it can be a bit overbearing. So oftentimes, one of the worst things that you can do is beg for your ex back immediately after the breakup. We find this is actually a very common type of behavior, any type of begging or pleading. Hey, don't leave me, I can change, things will be different, give me another chance. The reason this is such a bad mistake is one of the reasons that your ex probably broke up with you in the first place is they're kind of turned off by your anxious style. So any type of behavior that can be interpreted as anxious just subconsciously turns them off. And by simply engaging in that type of behavior again, you'll further turn them off and further push them away. Thing number 3, saying anything that is negative about their family or friends. So when I was 18 years old, I went through a breakup. And this breakup was not anything crazy. I guess it could be considered a general breakup. But I really didn't get along with my ex-girlfriend's family. They didn't really like me or like the way I handled things. And I was certainly culpable for some of the ways I did handle things. But I made the mistake of, when I got back in touch with my ex-girlfriend, who I wanted back, I made the mistake of saying, you know, I don't think your family gave me a fair shot. Or, you know, I didn't really like the way your dad handled that situation. And in turn, this further pushed us apart. And I couldn't understand why at the time, but essentially all I had done was badmouth her friends or family. To make matters worse, I didn't get along with one of her friends. I remember this girl did not like me and I did not like her, and we had a really hard time getting along. And I brought that up to her when I got back in touch with her. I badmouthed her friend again. Well, again, this just further pushed us apart. So it really did not help my ultimate goal of helping get my ex back. Thing number 4, stay away from hot topics that will start a fight. This is one of the most common mistakes we see people make throughout the ex recovery program. It is completely normal to want closure after a breakup, but one of the things that you should definitely stay away from is any type of hot topic that will be easy to blow up, so to speak. So let's take an example. Let's say that you and your ex got into fights all the time about your ex's flirting habits. And this is just something that you never got closure on, something that was never addressed, and something you can't help but bring up when you talk to them again. Well, bringing up that hot topic, while it may not technically begin a fight, it is the seeds for one to grow. Stay away from it. Thing number 5, having an in-depth conversation with their best friend. So you remember that breakup that I talked about that I went through when I was 18 years old? Well, one of the things that I did that was definitely a mistake is maybe a couple of weeks after the breakup, I called up my ex's very best friend. And these are best friends that aren't just like, hey, we met each other in high school and now we're best friends. This is best friends from childhood. I mean, this is a rooted, deep relationship. And I did have a pretty decent relationship with the best friend. And I just spent literally 2 hours on the phone venting to this best friend, talking about why I thought it was unfair that I was treated this way and why her family was treating me this way and why one of the other mutual friends was always had it out for me and I'm just tired of it and I'm happy to be gone and everything like that. I just vented. And I remember at some point in the conversation, I literally said to this person, I said, hey, this isn't going to get back to so-and-so. And of course, she assures me, oh, no, it will definitely not get back to so-and-so. Of course, I find out a couple of days later that everything that I said to this person got back to my ex-girlfriend. Now, ultimately, it was a dumb sort of idea of mine to vent to my ex's best friend, thinking that it wouldn't get back to her because I said some really mean things. So you're better off if you find yourself in this situation where your ex sends their best friend to almost be the go-between the two of you, just to not give them much. Don't be rude, but just sort of say, you know what, I'm just not ready to talk about it just yet. Because ultimately you will say something bad that will get back to your ex and then you're just in a whole can of worms. Thing number 6, taking flirting too far. I'm doing some research right now on the being there method, which is this concept that we talk a lot about on our website. Specifically, I'm revamping an article on how to get your ex back if they've moved on and have a new girlfriend or have a new boyfriend. And one of the strategies that we talk a lot about is the being there method. And what was interesting, and the reason this is really top of mind right now, is when I was researching the being there method, I pulled up an interview that I did with Coach Anna. Coach Anna and I basically spent an hour talking about all of the ins and the outs of the being there method. And one of the things that we talked about with the being there method is this concept of flirting and what happens if you or your ex takes flirting too far. Well, the way I would kind of view flirting is it's okay to flirt with your ex. You want flirting, but there is such a thing as taking it too far. And that line is simply in 2 phrases. It's okay for your ex to say, I miss you to you, and you to respond, I miss you too. But what's not okay is for you to say, or your ex to say, I love you, because that is a step too far. So just to give you an idea, that is the line in the sand with regards to flirting. Now let's talk about physical touch, because a lot of times with flirting, when you're seeing your ex in person, physical touch kind of gets into play. And sometimes you'll do these light touches, you'll hug and sort of touch each other's hands. That's okay. You can do stuff like that. But what's not okay is basically anything from first base on. If your ex tries to kiss you, the one thing you should do is pull away and say, I don't think we should be doing that right now. The important part is that right now, because it implies that at some point you'll be okay doing that, but you are going to draw this line in the sand. Now, of course, most people, when they get excited that things are going extremely well with their ex, take flirting too far, and that is a mistake for a lot of different reasons. There's a reason why one of the most difficult situations we find is friends with benefits, when they've taken flirting so far that they've actually slept together with their ex. Now, why is this a mistake? Well, because oftentimes your ex, once they sleep with you without a relationship, they're like, hey, I can do this all the time. Sweet, I don't need to commit. And that's not the line in the sand that you want to be drawing. Now, speaking of the I love you, let's talk about the final thing you should never say to your ex, and that is saying I love you way too soon. So, we briefly kind of touched on this concept with the flirting thing, the flirting sign with sign number 6. Well, here is the important thing. A lot of times our clients want their exes so bad that they rush the process. They jump the value ladder, so to speak, and they say, I love you way too soon before they built out any kind of value to have this be taken in a positive way. So why is this such a mistake? Well, simply put, when you say I love you to an ex, it's all about how they receive it based on how things are going to go or the trajectory your situation will go going forward. So if you say I love you a few days after the breakup, your ex is going to be like, cool, and move on. If you say I love you 4 months after the breakup, after you've gone through a no contact rule, after you've begun to rebuild connection on texting, after you've maybe gone on a few dates with other people, after you've rebuilt a connection through talking on the phone, after you've rebuilt a connection seeing your ex in person, if you say I love you then, the results are much different. So the timing of when you say something on that level, something so emotional, so touching, matters a lot. But do you want to know what matters even more than all of the things that you shouldn't say? It's probably figuring out even if you have a chance of getting your ex back. Now, luckily for you, on our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, we've put together a special free 2-minute quiz that's designed to help you understand what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back. And luckily for you, it's free to take. And if you're watching this on YouTube, simply look in the description below this YouTube video and click the link you see there. We will hook you up. You'll be able to take the quiz and even be given a free video course over the next 4 days on some of the basics about how to handle your breakup. Also, if you haven't liked, commented, or subscribed to any of our YouTube videos, please do so. Every little bit helps. I'll see you next time.